This is either going to be a continuation of the episode, or if you're seeing me saying this, I've split them out and still wearing the same outfit. So, so we've just gone through 1965, which is a whole thing. And then we had 1966 to 1969, where you had this awakening of the youth, Black consciousness, South African Students Association, the death of Verwoerd, and also we had the consolidation of and tightening and security. Everything was kind of ramped up during that period that is called the quiet years. So today we're going to speak about the years just before the 1973 Durban Uprisings. And we're going to first speak about those years, 1970 to 1969 to 1972. And then we're going to talk about two individuals who passed during this period and what that meant. By 1970, had achieved everything and had survived everything it had feared. Enemies were jailed, the laws were unquestionable, and the streets were quiet. And yet something had changed. Not in parliament, not in exile, but in classrooms, churches, clinics, universities, and late night conversations among young people who had never known freedom. Between 1970 and 1972, South Africa ended a new phase of resistance, internal, ideological, and unstoppable. This is the story of the generation, of how a generation began to stand up before it marched. Do you love this? So that 1970 apartheid state was confident, right? The Prime Minister, John Foster, presided over a powerful security apparatus, strict pass laws, and banned liberation movements. International criticism existed, but trade continued, and white South Africa felt secure. The confidence would become complacency. What had begun among students in the 1960s was now spreading. The philosophy of Black consciousness argued that oppression was not only physical, but psychological, which I've always said. Black people had been taught to doubt themselves 100%. And liberation began with self-definition. Led by figures like Steve Biko, these ideas moved from universities into churches and into community projects. The state had underestimated the power of belief. The regime did not immediately crush Black consciousness. Why? Because it was not illegal yet. Y'all know they're going to come for it. It wasn't armed, and it spoke the language of dignity, not revolution. But quietly, as we know, they opened some files. Keep an eye. I'm keeping an eye on you. Names were recorded, and surveillance intensified. The state was watching. Aren't they always watching? These people. It's what happens when you don't think of every eventuality, right? So, the South African Student Organization, SAFSO, was unlike earlier resistant bodies. It rejected white leadership, liberal paternalism, dependence on banned movements. Instead, it focused on political education, confidence building, and leadership training. Just love this so much. This was resistance designed to last, not provoke immediate repression. Black consciences reframed the struggle. It said, the most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. 1000% agree. That idea terrified the state because it could not be outlawed easily, because it traveled by word of mouth, no documents, no writings, like with Neville, because it changed how people saw themselves. At least that. They tried. So their response was police attended meetings undercover, leaders were questioned and warned, and universities were pressured to discipline students. This was containment, not yet destruction. By 1971, consciousness had moved decisively into communities. Activities launched health clinics, literacy programs, and youth leadership initiatives. Of what we all need. They were not charities, they were political acts. Assertions of self-reliance in a system built on dependency. Churches became critical spaces for discussion and mobilization. Some clergy embraced Black consciousness, arguing Christianity could not exist with radical domination, and liberation was moral as well as political. This alarmed the state. Religion had legitimacy, apartheid lacked. Police infiltration increased. Activists were followed, phones were tapped. But repression remained selective. The regime feared creating martyrs. On Robben Island, the political prisoners watched events closely. They saw youth awakening, new ideas emerging, and resistance returning without them. The older generation understood that it was necessary. Struggle had to renew itself once they had been gone. Black consciousness did not reject earlier liberation movements, but it did something radical. It refused to wait. The prison generation had survived repression. The youth generation would challenge fear itself. In 1972, student protests escalated. Rallies became bolder, speeches sharper, confidence unmistakable. The state could no longer pretend nothing was happening. Ideas do not stay on campuses. Workers, especially in Natal, began discussing wages, dignity, and organization. They had no unions, no legal protection, but they had examples. Security reports warned of growing militancy, of ideological spread, of loss of control. Apartheid had crushed organization. It had failed to crush belief. This period did not produce a revolution. And I think that's very important about what it did do, right? It produced something more dangerous to apartheid. Confidence, organization, and a sense of inevitability. By 1972, students were politicized, workers were restless, the youth were unafraid. The system felt stable. It was not. So between 1970 and 1972, South Africa crossed the line from silence to speech, from thought to action, from fear to confidence. The apartheid state sensed it but reacted too slowly. 73 coming. With it, the end of the quiet years. I just love how it was focused on getting people politically conscious, educated, building up their confidence, changing the way they thought about themselves. Now, to go into two very, very serious discussions, two very, very serious stories. So before I wanted to move out of this 1965 to 1972 period, I wanted to tell their story. And these two individuals are Imam Abdullah Haron and Ahmed Timol. On the 27th of September 1969, a Muslim cleric was buried in Cape Town. The police said he slipped on a staircase. They said it was an accident. They said there was nothing political about his death. His name was Imam Abdullah Haron. He had been in police custody for 123 days. And the state wanted the story to end there. Abdullah was born in 1924 in Cape Town. He grew up in the city rigidly divided by race, religion, and power. From a young age, he understood that faith was not only ritual, it was responsibility. As an imam at the Claremont Mosque, he preached a form of Islam rooted in justice, humility, and solidarity with the oppressed. This alone set him apart. Apartheid preferred religion to be quiet. Well, they preferred everything to be quiet, didn't they? But Haron refused. The Imam believed that justice was not a political inconvenience. It was a moral crime. He spoke against forced removals, racial humiliation, and economic exploitation. He encouraged education. He supported families broken by detention and exile, and he believed Muslims could not be neutral in a system built on cruelty. This position drew attention, not from crowds, but from the security branch. By the 1960s, the apartheid state was deeply suspicious of religious figures who crossed racial boundaries. Haron traveled. He met activists. He maintained international contacts. The state interpreted these actions through its own logic, which we can all agree has been flawed. Connection meant conspiracy, faith meant cover, and Haron's mosque became a place of quiet resistance. In May 1969, Abdullah was arrested. No charges were announced. No trial followed. He was detained under security legislation. His family was given no information. For weeks, they did not know where he was held. This uncertainty was part of the punishment, of course, because cruelty is always the reason. He was held at the Caledon Square police station. Now, like John Foster, in Johannesburg, it was a place with two faces. Publicly, a police building. Privately, an interrogation site. Haron was kept in isolation, interrogated repeatedly, denied legal access. The aim was not information alone, it was pressure. When Abdullah Haron's body was returned to his family, it told the story the police refused to acknowledge. Bruising, broken ribs, internal injuries. Medical professionals questioned the official explanation. Witnesses spoke quietly of beatings and abuse. The police claimed he had fallen. Injuries suggested sustained assault. As you say, the body doesn't lie. The state announced that Imam Haron had slipped on a staircase. No independent investigation followed. An inquest accepted the police explanation. Of course they did. And the case was closed. Once again, a death in custody was reduced to misfortune. The pattern was already familiar. Cape Town's Muslim community did not accept the explanation. Thousands attended Haron's funeral. It became one of the largest political gatherings the city had seen in years. People did not chant slogans. They mourned, and mourning became resistance. For decades, the truth remained buried. Families feared retaliation, witnesses aged, records disappeared. The apartheid state counted on time. Time almost worked. After 1994, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission revisited Imam Haron's death. Former security branch members testified. They admitted he had been assaulted. They admitted he had been interrogated violently. The staircase story collapsed. Don't think anybody believed it, by the way. At last, the state acknowledged what the community had known all along. Imam Haron terrified apartheid not because he carried weapons, but because he carried legitimacy. He showed that resistance was not foreign, not communist, not immoral. It was ethical, rooted in faith, and this was dangerous. Imam Haron did not live to see justice, but he changed how faith was understood in South Africa. He proved that belief could not be separated from dignity, that silence could be a sin. The state killed him to make an example. History restored him as one. Next, I want to speak about an event that happened on the morning of the 27th of October 1971. And the man they found on that morning, dead on the pavement outside a police building in Johannesburg. The police said he jumped. They said he fell. They said it was suicide. His name was Ahmed Timol. For 46 years, the state's version stood until it didn't. Ahmed Timol was not a public figure. He did not lead armies. He did not command crowds. He did not seek attention. He was a teacher. Born in 1945 into a Muslim family in Johannesburg, Timol came of age in a South Africa where racial injustice was normalized and obedience was demanded. From early adulthood, he understood something fundamental. Faith without justice was empty, and education without freedom was hollow. Timol's Islam was not withdrawn from the world. It was engaged. He believed that dignity was indivisible, that injustice anywhere violated moral law. This belief brought him into contact with progressive religious thinkers, political activists, and underground resistance networks. He read widely, he taught quietly, he organized carefully. This was not recklessness, it was principled commitment. By the late 1960s, political space inside South Africa had collapsed. Organizations were banned, meetings were illegal, possessions of pamphlets could mean prison. Activism moved underground. Ahmed Timol became involved in clandestine political education and distribution of material. This was not sabotage, it was thought. And apartheid feared thought as much as guns. The security police did not hunt criminals. They hunted potential. Teachers were dangerous. Thinkers were dangerous. People who connected ethics to politics were dangerous. Timol fit the profile. Quiet, disciplined, committed. He was watched. By 1971, John Foster Square was known among activists as a place people did not return from unchanged. It was police headquarters and an interrogation site, as I mentioned earlier. People whispered about it. They knew what happened inside. The state insisted it was lawful. Those who went in knew better. On the 22nd of October 1971, Timol was arrested at a roadblock. He was taken into security branch custody. So we know the drill. No lawyer, no family contact, no court appearance, detention without trial. From that moment, the law no longer protected him. Former detainees would later testify. Interrogations lasted days. Sleep was denied. Beatings were routine. Humiliation was deliberate. The aim was not confession. It was breaking. Ahmed Timol was held on the 10th floor of John Foster Square. 5 days later, police informed Timol's family he had jumped from a window. They said he confessed, he panicked, and he left. There was no independent witnesses, and the body, as I said earlier, will always tell the truth. Obviously, told a completely different story. They recorded his death as a suicide. The case was closed. The security branch moved on. But families remembered, and lies aged badly. When Ahmed Timol entered John Foster Square, he did not enter a police station. He entered a system designed to operate beyond scrutiny. Behind its modern facade, John Foster Square was the nerve center of security branch power in Johannesburg. People went in alive. Some did not come out. Ahmed Timol was held under security legislation that allowed indefinite detention without trial. No charge sheet, no magistrate, no lawyer, no fixed period. This legal vacuum mattered. Once detained, a person no longer existed in the normal legal sense. They became a subject of interrogation. The security branch controlled time, space, sleep, movement, information. What followed was not accidental. It was enabled by law. Former detainees held at John Foster Square would later describe a familiar pattern. Interrogation did not follow a timetable. It followed exhaustion. Questioning continued through the night. Lights were kept on. Sleep was denied. Beatings were not chaotic. They were calibrated. Enough to cause pain, enough to frighten, enough to avoid obvious marks where possible. This was not about extracting truth. It was about submission. Ahmed Timol was interrogated over several days. He was questioned about political contacts, literature, networks, and belief. There is no evidence that he attempted escape. What is known is this. By the final day of his detention, Timol was physically compromised. His body showed signs consistent with assault. This later mattered when the state claimed he jumped. He was held on the 10th floor, as I said, and that detail became central. So, after his death, the police claimed that he ran to the window, threw himself out, and fell to his death. But the 10th floor was not a place where detainees accessed. Windows were guarded, interrogations were supervised, and movements were controlled. The idea that a detainee could suddenly sprint unchallenged defied the building's own protocol. After his death, inquest was held in 1972. And of course, the police version was accepted. Key problems were inconsistencies in testimony, medical evidence indicating prior injury, and contradictions between officers. So they didn't even line up their stories. The inquest relied heavily on security branch statements. It did not test powers. It deferred it. The verdict: Ahmed Timol had committed suicide. The lie was now legal. The lie worked because of context. So in 1971-72, the press were restricted, lawyers were intimidated, and political families were marginalized. Security branch officers were presumed truthful always. Like some other people recently. Detainees were presumed unreliable. The system did not require the lie to be convincing, only official. But his family knew something was wrong. Unfortunately, they lived under threat. Challenging the state meant surveillance, harassment, and economic retaliation. They mourned privately, they remembered, they waited. Apartheid assumed, like with Imam and Haron, that time would bury the truth. It underestimated memory. In October 2017, 46 years after Ahmed Timol died on a Johannesburg pavement, a South African courtroom reopened a case that the apartheid state had declared finished. The question was simple: did Ahmed Timol jump, or was he killed? The reopened inquest did not begin with the state. It began with persistence. His family never accepted the official story. They collected documents, they spoke to witnesses, they waited for a country where truth could be heard. After democracy, new legal pathways emerged. Old inquests could be revisited. Apartheid seal narratives could be tested. The case became one of the most important. The inquest took place in the High Court. This time, the state did not control the narrative. The security branch testimony was no longer immune. Forensic evidence could be examined independently. Witnesses who had once been silenced could speak, and the court was not asking what was politically convenient. It was asking what was the truth. Medical experts testified about Ahmed Timol's injury. They explained the nature of bruising, the evidence of blunt force trauma, injuries inconsistent with a voluntary fall. The court heard that Ahmed Timol was already injured before the fall. This mattered. A man who jumps does not arrive already beaten. The body contradicted the lie. The court examined the physical space of the 10th floor, windows, corridors, sightlines. Experts testified that detainees were closely supervised, windows were not easily accessible, and security protocols made sudden, unchallenged movements implausible. The story of a panicked leap collapsed under scrutiny. The architecture itself rejected the state's version. Former security branch officers testified. Their accounts conflicted. Timeline shifted. Details changed. Certainty dissolved. The court noted evasiveness, contradiction, and a failure to account for injury. What had once sounded authoritative now sounded fragile. The passage of time did not protect the lie. It exposed it. In October 2017, the court delivered its findings. They were unequivocal. Ahmed Timol did not commit suicide. But it's nice that now you admitted it. Thanks. He was assaulted, interrogated under torture, and murdered. The judge ruled that the original inquest was wrong, the police version was false, and members of the security branch was responsible. After 46 years, the state's story collapsed. The ruling corrected history, but accountability was incomplete. Many officers were dead, Some were elderly. Prosecutions were limited. Justice arrived late, and it arrived unevenly, but it arrived clearly. Truth was no longer contested. Ahmed Timol's inquest was not only about one man. It became a template. Other cases followed. Deaths once ruled suicide were re-examined. The logic of apartheid denial began to unravel. The lie had not been unique. It had been systemic. Ahmed Timol did not live to see justice, but his life reshaped it. He was not a martyr by choice. He was a teacher who refused silence. The state tried to erase him with a lie. History restored him with the truth. Thank you so much for listening to these quiet years and the story of Imam, Abdullah, Haron, and Ahmed Timol. Two men who were taken from their families way too soon. Come back next week, and next week we go on to the big boy, the 1973 Durban Uprisings, which I found so satisfying. Maybe when I tell it, you'll get what I mean. Okay, see you guys next week. Bye.